As many of you know, Christy and I have been involved in a very terrible car accident, and it left me disabled for many years. And most of the doctors pretty much gave up on me and told me that I was going to have to stay confined to a wheelchair the rest of my life and live in pain. And I'm very happy to be here today to tell you that that is not the case. And I refused to listen to all that advice and took matters into my own hands and continued to fight to find a solution, to find the answer and the path to find my way out of that disability and pain. So, back in August of 1997, Christy and I were on our way down to Florida to a chiropractic convention that we were going to go work at. And we were really excited about the little vacation, a little time in the sun, and so forth. But unfortunately, there was a really bad storm and it was raining super hard, and we lost control of our vehicle and hydroplaned into oncoming traffic, and were met by a moving truck head on, and it basically ran over us. Now, Christy had whiplash, which pulled part of her vertebra off the front of her neck, and then the roof hit her on top of the head and basically burst fractured C3, 4, and 5. These are like a lifesaver. If you put it on the counter and smashed it into several fragments, that's what happened to her neck. And they say 95% of the people with her injuries are killed immediately and the rest are paralyzed. So we've always said, by the grace of God, she's been a miracle in the fact that she's made it through it without any neurological deficits or problems. They basically reconstructed her neck and put a cadaver shin bone into C3, 4, and 5 with some bolts and brackets around the front. And just a few months later, I should say, she had an amazing recovery and then took care of myself for a bunch of years. Now, we had tried to have kids for about 3 years prior to that accident. And fortunately, there were no little ones in the back seat because the back seat just didn't even really exist anymore after that accident. And so I woke up to her screaming we were going to die as we were already hydroplaning out of control. I had reclined all the way back and fell asleep, and trying to get my bearings, realized that we weren't going to miss that last truck coming at us. So I braced my legs as hard as I could on the dashboard and literally snapped my pelvis in half in the front and back, ripped the muscles off my legs from my pelvis, and lost a third of my intestines. Now, I did remain conscious and somehow crawl out of the window and managed to stagger around the vehicle to try to find Christy to try to help. Now, I used to be a fireman before I was a chiropractor, so I knew not to move her and basically how to handle an emergency situation like that. And so frantically trying to find a pulse on her neck, I couldn't find a pulse. I thought that she was dead. And then I realized my hips were broken and I collapsed. So it seemed like an eternity before anybody came. And then finally I felt somebody grab my hand, and it brought this calmness up my arm and through my entire body, and just a sense of peace, even though it was still raining and I was in so much pain. And it seemed to take away the pain. And then I opened my eyes only to find that there's nobody anywhere around me. And I'm looking at my hand, and I still feel the grip on my hand. And I realized that God was present, and I thought he was coming to take me to heaven. And for that brief moment, I didn't care about who I was leaving behind and what family would miss me. And I thought it was all real, and I'm going to heaven. And there was a little piece of the clouds that opened up, and the sun hit me in the face. And I thought that was my pathway through. And then I heard a voice so clear in my head, told me to relax, and that I was going to be okay, and that my wife was fine, and that I need to just lay down and rest. And I thought to myself, I said, Lord, you've suffered so much more than I would ever fathom in this lifetime. And what I'm going through right now, this is nothing. And so I said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And from this moment on, I choose not to suffer. And the moment the words left my lips, the pain was back, the chaos was back, the rain was back. And I remember the rest of that day just repeating that mantra over and over and over again, that pain is inevitable and that suffering was optional. And I did survive the day, much to everybody's surprise. And they were able to stop the bleeding, and in a couple weeks, sew all the muscles back into my pelvis. And then started a journey that inevitably would have taken me 17 years to finally get out of pain. So the first 4 years were pretty rough. And then I managed to be able to go back to work as a chiropractor and use an activator instrument to put less stress on my body because I couldn't physically torque my body the way I once used to. And then, unfortunately, a few years later, I had another trauma that put me in bed for a few more years. Had several more back surgeries, and then they put a computer in my spine and basically just gave up on me after 3.5 years in a wheelchair. And I had a remote control that when I turned the remote control on, I wouldn't feel anything from the chest down anymore. And then I could tweak the remote just to get the floor to come back to the sensation of the bottom of my feet. So I went the medical route. I let them medicate me, and I had tried so hard to not even take a Tylenol for the first 15 years because I just had to know where I was at and if what I was doing was helping me or hurting me, and I didn't want to live in a bubble all the time. And so then finally I did live in a bubble, and it was the worst 3 years ever. Every 3 hours I was taking narcotics and mood enhancers and muscle relaxers, and it was exactly what I feared. I lived in a bubble. I was not happy. My attitude was pretty rough. I would argue with my family. They'd see me scream and yell, and I'm such a peaceful person. So to have that side of me come out, it absolutely was not me. And there had to be a better way. And there was no way I was going to spend the rest of my life living like that. I just couldn't do it. But then I was backed into a corner because I couldn't not take the medication because the pain was so great. And it allowed me to go from a pain level, say 10 to an 8. Now, for many years, I couldn't feel my arms and legs, but my spine from my neck to my tailbone was like a knife stabbed in my spine. And anytime I moved, it would be wiggling them. I couldn't feel my arms and legs, but my hands and feet were like burning broken glass for years. And it was relenting. I would put my arms and hands as far away from my head as possible just to try to departmentalize the pain so I wouldn't be in as much pain. And so then led me to my first amazing breakthrough. I was doing my continuing ed, and one of the doctors was talking about neurofeedback, which I had been involved with for many years. And they were saying that you could actually do neurofeedback every single day. And if you did that for up to hours a day, you can get off narcotics. And I'm thinking, well, how come nobody's told me this in all these years? So finally, within just a few months, I started seeing major breakthroughs in my own abilities to take care and manage myself. It took quite a bit for many years for the kids and other people to help get me into the car to move me if we were deciding to leave. And the kids being just in middle school would be experts at taking my power chair and strapping it on the back of the chair of the van or the truck and being able to help fidget and get me all positioned with all the pillows inside and all of that. So, man, was that quite the ordeal. I mean, every time they would start or stop or turn, I'd be in the back just hollering out in pain. And, it's one thing being a physician that when somebody complains about a pain or how they're hurting, how I can just lay hands on them immediately and most likely help get them out of pain. But to see children watch their own dad suffer and not be able to do anything about it, and your spouse seeing you suffer and not being able to adjust me and make me feel better, I would feel helpless, if they were suffering and I didn't know what I could do or be able to do. And so it really led them into this whole journey of becoming, honorary doctors themselves, because we found one journey or one technique or product or technology after another. And guess who were my doctors? It was my wife and my daughter and my son. These guys were the ones that basically helped me perform hours of therapy a day, and was not an easy task. And I was not always the best patient either.